the electronic stimulation is in your home, just like food. So, if you, at the very least, if you have a little one, a baby, an infant, one of the things I tell parents is you can't wait too long to expose your kid to electronics. You can't wait too long. They will get it. No television. Music is fine. Music is fine. No television, no computer, no cell phone, none of that stuff, as long as possible. So they get to develop their brain without it. And they develop their ability to relate. It's a time for connection. And it's a lot harder for parents because you have to relate to your kids. You got to be with there. If you're on your electronic addiction, then you're teaching them how to be on an electronic addiction. This is not easy. So if you have one who hasn't started yet, I would wish for you that your kid has as little electronics as possible. By the way, have no fear. They will be really adept with it because they're going to do it at everybody else's house. Yeah, they're a little later on the learning curve, but that's okay. If your kid is older, set limits. Get really, really clear. Set limits. There are special times that you can use your electronic stimulation, of course, of preference. Now, all these controls, I'm not talking about all the other ideas that you have to control the internet and pornography and people. Well, you got to do all that stuff. Yes, I'm not talking about it at that level. I'm talking about it at the level of simple electronic stimulation. No texting, no messaging, not even, phone, I guess, you got to have some phone, I guess. But, you know, at what point does a kid have to start talking on the telephone? Again, the longer your child waits, the better. If he or she is already into it, set limits. They're not going to like it. Nobody likes to be told that they can't have their favorite addiction. They will react. They will attempt to manipulate. All of this is good. It's their job to attempt to figure out how they can represent themselves. But you can use these as learning experiences. Like, oh, I see you wanted to maybe make up something that wasn't true. I wonder how come that happened. I wonder if there was maybe another way you could have done that. How does it feel? How do you feel about yourself when you're lying? How does that make you feel about yourself? I have a different way. Remember, this is shrink different. Psychology with a twist. So you have an opportunity for your kids to learn how to express their emotion. And you can deal with emotion in your house. I told the story of the ugly duckling a couple of weeks ago. The whole idea of someone who has a very strong feeling orientation being born into a family that doesn't recognize the existence of feeling at all. They feel alien. They feel like the ugly duckling. Until they find another swan and their beauty emerges. So how can you start to bring in the beauty that happens when you can relate? The beauty of children, to have them relate and feel good about who they are. Encourage it. Open up conversations about it. Recognize that there's lots of learning opportunities. Kids will be deceitful if they have fear. You can talk about it. Incredible opportunities. But all those opportunities vanish from the tsunami of electronic stimulation. So I'm wondering, do we have any questions out there, Mr. J? You said there were a couple of email requests.
Email requests, and I was going to let everyone know that, you know, if you'd like a... Oh, well, someone did have a question, but you answered it.
All right.
Already. You've already nailed that one. That's good. That's progress. But if you have a question or a comment on the topic that we're talking about tonight, you can Skype in at TFOK Radio. That's the Skype name. Or you can call in and ask Doc a question at 405-316-8964. That's 405-316-8964.
Okay. So I'm talking about emotional intelligence as the intelligence. Let's say it's one of the capacities of the soul. The soul. What is, like when you ask, what is a human being? How do you define a human being? For me, I wrote a book, again I mentioned to you, Romancing the Shadow, and in there we had to define what is a human being. If you're going to talk about the psyche, you got to define your terms, or it becomes like the House of Babel. So my co-author and I, Dr. Connie Zweig, we defined a human being first as there is a capacity we have to be one with the light, universal consciousness. We all have that in the same way that
we do have a call coming
that
in, Doc.
consciousness.
Hey, Doc.
Yeah.
We do have a call coming in right now. Here we go. 1 second.
Whoops.
You're on Shrink Different with Doc Wolf.
Hello.
Hello.
Uh-oh.
Hi. I'm listening to Shrink Different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And talking about the technology with the kids, and he's mentioned that we should find a different outlet, and before they get except for music, kind of steer them away from it as long as you can.
Yes.
So my question is, for those who are parents who have teenagers that are in their, say, anywhere between 12 and 17 or 18, the technologies, electronic technologies, that's their life. I mean, some of them won't even talk to you unless they text you. Even though if you say, call me, they won't do that. So my question to him is, for those who are already into it and very heavily, and that also that age group is a rebellious stage where the teens kind of separate themselves from the parents anyway, what suggestions does he have for teens who are already into it, that age group, so that it doesn't completely alienate them from their parents, which is a problem anyway in that age group, between 12 and, say, 17?
Great question. What's your name?
My name is Terry Roseborough.
Okay, Carrie. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for calling in. I wouldn't just put 12 to 17 in the same age group, first of all. If we wanted to split them up, I'd say 12 to 14, 14 to 16, 16 to 18, like that.
Okay, let's say 14 to 16.
Okay, so
because those are the high schoolers, and they're heavy with that in high school, even when they're in a class.
That's right. So one question I would have is the influence of the family on the child to the teen, in the sense that one way of addressing this issue is to begin to give them an opportunity to relate in a different way. So, for instance, I believe that punishment doesn't work because you don't learn what to do when you're punished to not do something. You have to be taught what to do something. That's what changes behavior. So, for instance, if you had a family gathering once a week, and it was an opportunity for people to check in with each other, maybe you played a board game, and you sat around, you had no electronic stimulation, and you just spent time with each other for a couple of hours. That would be one thing to introduce into the family if there isn't that kind of thing. It's not, let's hang out together when we go to the supermarket. Let's create a place for us to spend time with each other as family. Now that's going to work for some people. There are different things that you can do in that time, depending upon the development of the kids and the development and the insight of the parents. The addictive, rebellious... Go ahead. You want to respond, Carrie?
Do you take away their electronic devices?
You have a choice. There are consequences. What I'm suggesting to begin with is rather than take something away, you put something in. They're going to get plenty of electronic stimulation. If you feel that, for instance, their grades are at issue and their behavior, remember, I define an addiction as a pattern of behavior that is disruptive to the balance of your own life. If they're spending too much time on Warcraft and they're not focusing on their school activities, that's an important conversation. The conversation could go something like this. Hey, what's happening with school? I see you're not able to do whatever the and a reasonable expectation for them is they should understand that there's a relationship between the amount of effort they put into their schoolwork and the kind of result they get from their schoolwork. And ideally, you would have them understand at age 12 to 14 that they may be setting themselves up for negative consequences down the road if they don't change their relationship to schoolwork. So again, I'm not focusing on the electric stimulation. I'm focusing on the schoolwork. Okay, we see you're not doing your schoolwork, or you're not accomplishing something. I wonder what we can do to change that. You need some time. What about, let's do some time around your iPad or your computer games. Ideally, the teenager would come to recognize that their relationship to this stuff, to that electronics, is in fact getting in their own way. This would be my approach, rather than going into a traditional, authoritative, punitive approach. Because a traditional, authoritative, punitive approach is going to have a traditional, reactionary response. Some kids will be fine with it, and they'll respond appropriately. Others will get rebellious with it. They'll have an attitude. They'll cheat. They'll lie. There's all kinds of possibilities. Shrink different, me, emotional intelligence. I'd want to approach it to educate this young person that there are consequences. I would talk to them about the possibility that they were addicted. How would they know if they were addicted? I have two questions that I ask anybody that's in denial. The first question is, how would you know if you had a problem? How would you know if you had a problem with alcohol? How would you know if you had a problem with food? How would you know if you had a problem with sex? How would you know if you had a problem with your Game Boy? How would you know? And I'd have you write it down if you could and sign it. And then the second question is, because for instance, when I did this with one kid, he was at the University of Wisconsin, I said, how would you know if you had a problem with drinking? He said, well, if I got drunk more than 2 nights a week. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, you can get drunk 2 nights a week? He said, yeah, that's okay with me. But if I get drunk 3 nights a week, then I got a problem. I said, okay. We wrote it down. This is a kid who had been sober now for a year, off of drugs and pills and alcohol, but he wanted to go back and try it again. Like any healthy addict, you want to see if you can handle it. So the second question is, if you found out you had a problem, what would you do about it? Important question. If you realize, I got a problem, by my own definition, what would you do about it? And you write that answer down. For him, it was, I have to give it up. And he did. Because obviously within 2 weeks, he was getting drunk 5 nights a week, and the ball game was over for him. But now, going back to the kid in the family, to raise the question to your kid, to him or her, and say, what do you think about it? How would you know? What would make you think you may have a problem because you're spending as much time as you are on your electronics? How would you know you had a problem? How about you stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning? You got to get up at 7 to go to school and you're tired. Would you know that was a problem? I'm hearing a phone come on in here.
I got it. It was another caller.
Are we still on?
Yeah, we're still on the tape.
Hello? Hello?
Hello,
Yeah.
I'm still here.
Oh, you're still here. Okay. So again, I would ask the teenager to think about, how would you know if you had a problem with what you're doing? What would a problem look like? And have them tell you, what's a problem? And then maybe have a conversation about it. And they could say, well, I could spend, if I spend only 8 hours a day on Warcraft, it's okay. But if I spend 9, it's not okay. Or something like that. You have a discussion. You say, really? And then, if they're spending 8 hours a day, they won't be able to control it. You write it down, and then you say, if you found out you had a problem, what would you want to do about it? And you write that down, and you have them sign it. So that's another way of approaching this behavior. The key, as far as I'm concerned, is to teach people to be responsible for themselves. To do that, you have to develop your own self-awareness. Otherwise, you're operating according to somebody else's rules, and you're always going to be rebellious when you're operating across somebody else's rules. So there's a couple of